Chapter 251. Let me see your proof, the soldier at the border said calmly. At the border, there were more than a dozen large searchlights and some soldiers were setting up temporary sentry posts. Lu Shu flashed his officer pass as the soldier held up something that looked like a POS terminal and keyed in Lu Shu's serial number. Only after he had checked the validity of Lu Shu's identification pass, he finally let him pass. But just when Lu Xiaoyu was about to pass, the soldier said calmly, "I'm sorry, but this child has no identification proof, so I can't let her pass." Lu Shu was stunned for a moment. He had forgotten that Lu Xiaoyu wasn't a member of the Heavenly Network. But before he could consider his options, Jiang Shui pulled out an envelope from his pocket. His two long fingers pulled out a document with a bright red seal from the envelope. Upon seeing the document, the soldier said in a deep voice, "I'm sorry, but I'm in no position to deal with this. Please wait." He hurried inside and appeared with a major rank officer who gestured for the gates to be opened. During the whole process, the officer did not interact with Jiang Shui and everything happened silently. Lu Shu was secretly shocked. Just how much influence did Jiang Shui's family have in the military? The cordon was quite a distance from the main camp and they had to take a car. For some reason, entering such a high-security area had everyone quietened down. Upon reaching the brightly lit main camp, Lu Shu found everything familiar, the military tents and the food truck where a bunch of chefs was busy cooking. The military tents were set up in an orderly manner as if the distance between each tent was meticulously measured. Why are so many tents empty? Lu Shu asked out of curiosity. Jiang Shui smiled, "Do you know why there's a hurry to evacuate the traffic?" "Why?" "Because there are still many Daoyuan students stuck outside." Gathering the Daoyuan students required time, especially in the Qingzhou area which consisted of 1 city, 1 district, 6 ethnic prefectures, 30 states, 7 ethnic states, 2 state-owned cities, and 3 administrative districts. With such a large area to cover, it was impossible for all to arrive at the Salt Lake within a night. Those coming from the east would still be stuck on the roads. They were also prepared for unexpected guests like Lu Shu and Jiang Shui. Someone up there must have given such instructions as Lu Shu and Jiang Shui were immediately allocated a tent. Lu Xiaoyu noticed the aroma from the cooking class and tugged at Lu Shu's sleeve. "Wait a minute," Lu Shu smiled. Only after entering the tent did they notice 2 other people already inside, packing their own things. Surprisingly, one of them was the teenager that Lu Shu had met not too long ago outside. Lu Shu checked out the interior of the tent. Not only was the arrangement of tents orderly, even the beds were placed and made neatly. One tent was meant to accommodate 16 people. Each tent was 4.5 times 7.5 m in size with windows at the side, and supported by 30 or so steel tubes that could withstand gales of up to level 6 and 6 centimeters of snow. The 2 insiders saw the newcomers. Besides the teenager from earlier on, the other teen with a rather chubby face decided to greet them. In fact, everyone knew that the people in this tent were of rich and important backgrounds. Although the soldiers at the border were also allowed to let those with contributions pass, who else besides Jiang Shui and Lu Shu had ever been inside remains? No one. These people were exposed to the importance of diplomacy and connections from their parents and understood the rules of their world. Knowing that these were people of similar backgrounds, it was natural to establish a good rapport. These people might become your colleagues, or maybe, everyone here would be in the higher levels of the Heavenly Network. This might seem far-fetched, but to these people, being normal or ordinary was a tragedy. These teens from such backgrounds only had one goal in mind: to stand out from the rest. "My name is Chen Zhuan, a full-fledged Class E, and a 2nd lieutenant. What about you two?" The chubby teenager greeted cheerfully. "Jiang Shui, fresh Class D, lieutenant, gender male." Jiang Shui had always been slightly apathetic when interacting with anyone else besides Lu Shu. After clarifying that he was a male, he went on to choose his bed. Chen Zhuan was shocked, "Male?" But he remained expressionless and wasn't too concerned about his apathy. He turned towards Lu Shu, who was friendlier. Glancing at Chen Xuan's wristwatch, Lu Shu immediately knew it was worth a lot. This friend was someone Lu Shu must have. I'm Lu Shu, a full-class lieutenant. Lu Shu chuckled. Xuan, which family are you from? How old are you this year? Your wrist, have calluses? Lu Shu almost slipped his tongue and asked Chen Xuan about the worth of his wristwatch. But, something still seemed off. What calluses? Chen Xuan gave a puzzled look. Only 4 practitioners had arrived, but they only got weirder. The first teen refused to talk and his name was still not made known. The second was a beautiful boy. And the third person seemed normal, but something was wrong with the way he talked. And who would bring a young girl into the remains? Chen Xuan came into eye contact with Lu Xiaoyu. But Chen Xuan wasn't slow. The only reason he was still a Class E was that he wasn't imparted the next method. Even his family couldn't do anything about it due to the strict regulations in the Heavenly Network. Mia Ting couldn't be bribed and his underlings wouldn't dare to defy his orders. Jiang Shu's Class D status was surprising. This meant that he was either a genius with tier A aptitude or that he had contributions to his name. Chen Xuan had memorized the entire list of 71 geniuses with tier A aptitude and Jiang Shui wasn't on it. This meant that he had contributions? So, he must be involved in the MT Beimeng remains? Chen Xuan was quick-witted and able to analyze situations with little information. If not for his wit, he wouldn't have been able to stand out. Chapter 252. Chen Xuan turned his gaze to Lu Shu. This youth is actually a lieutenant too, and in Class C lieutenant at that. Seems like his military achievement is beyond question. But there is only one question: if he is already promoted to a lieutenant, why only a Class C? Is his aptitude not up to mark? The fact is, if a person is able to distinguish oneself in the family, surely, he or she would not be an easy character to be reckoned with. No family would want to disgrace themselves by letting out those who were too dumb. To tell the truth, Chen Xuan was a little envious of Jiang Shui and Lu Shu. Not envious because Jiang obtained the method to promotion, but that he was at where the remains were being opened. Chen Xuan felt that had he entered the remains, he would have succeeded too. Hence, his presence here now. Sometimes the mentality determines one's behavior. Ordinary Daoyuan class students associated the remains to danger. To enter would spell certain death and thus they were afraid. But to the child of a familial clan like Chen Xuan, the remains were an opportunity. All of a sudden, the youth who had been making his bed in silence suddenly straightened up and said, "Have any of you distinguished yourselves at the remains? I am Gao Shenin, Lieutenant, Class D, Junior Class. I fought in the border battles before." Chen Xuan chuckled quietly at that point. The frostiness for the better half of a day, was it because he detests me? There was such a divide within the circle of children. Those who had fought in battles look down somewhat upon those who have not. To them, the latter are all greenhouse flowers, without the guts. Such situations were all the more apparent in the military compound, with some even flaunting their battle scars proudly and ignoring those who have never fought before. All that this group of people would think about all day was where could they go for the next battle. For instance, when Chen Xuan introduced himself earlier, Gao Shenin immediately knew that he had never fought in a battle before and promptly ignored his presence. However, Gao immediately warmed to Jiang Shui and Lu Shu when they arrived upon knowing that they, too, had fought and distinguished themselves in battles. Lu Shu chuckled in reply, yes, I've fought at the remains before. Good day to you. He thought, are all these people big clients? Should I go buy a book on marketing when I return to learn how to protect them? Why are you still a Class E? Gao Shenin asked, confused. Were you not rewarded with the power? Lu Shu smiled. I am a Class E power type awakened person. In terms of practice, too low a level isn't worth mentioning. Both Chen Xuan and Gao Shenin were momentarily stunned. It was indeed rare to encounter an awakened one. Under the normal circumstance, everyone mainly focused on cultivation. Only a lucky few would be trained both in cultivation and awakening, thus belonging to the select group groomed exclusively, as the increase in cultivation level would mean the same for the level of awakening. It's really rare to encounter one with such unique circumstance like Lu Shu's technique of awakening. Is something awry? Chen Xuan suddenly felt that something was amiss and inquired cautiously, "Which clan do you belong to?" Lu Shu was taken aback. Why mention family and clan all of a sudden? He gave a deep sigh and replied, "The clan of buried love." From Chen Xuan's distress, plus 333. What is this crap about the clan of buried love? I'm asking which clan do you hail from? However, before he could explain, Lu Shu chortled merrily, "I'm not like all of you, I don't belong to any clan. There is really no need to deny such things. Or should one come up with a fabricated clan to appear superior and posh like Chen Xuan? Don't think there's such a need. If one can cultivate up to grade A, anybody could have come up with their own clans. This is still a world where the truths prevail everywhere where the fist is within reach." When Chen Xuan realized that Lu Shu was merely an ordinary student of Daoyuan class, his desire to befriend him waned slightly. After all, how far can an awakened person without background go? But Gao Shinin was different. As long as the person is ready to fight and shed blood, he would be willing to befriend him despite his background. This youth with his resolute look seemed to have a relatively simple worldview. He was simply standing there, body as erect as a rifle propped up. The group had finally broken the ice. Jiang Shui stood by the side, listening quietly, not uttering a word. Chen Xuan and Gao Shinin were a little awkward and their conversation almost crashed. Chen enjoyed talking about supercars whereas Gao was interested in chatting about where would there be possibilities of battles and where else can one open up new remains. Evidently, when two have nothing in common, every word is one too many. In the end, Chen Xuan called Gao Shinin a rash fellow while Gao called Chen a gilded youth, a flippant flower from the greenhouse. Lu Shu voiced his agreement with both of them. In actual fact, the impression of the children from the clans was misleading. After knowing them better, one would realize that they are nothing more than a bunch of underage teenagers. This was an awkward age whereby they were not considered childish, yet could only feign sophistication and maturity. Chen Xuan suddenly joked, half seriously, "Lu Shu, why did you bring your children here? Haven't Lu Sun said that one must travel light when going for battles?" Lu Shu said, eyebrows raised, "Did Mr. Lu Sun ever say that?" Mr. Lu Sun said so many things in his lifetime, who knows what did he truly say or not. How about you shout him here so we can ask? Chen Xuan chortled. It's probably very tough to ask him here. Lu Shu sighed deeply then continued, but I can probably send you to him. From Chen Xuan's distress, plus 666. Lu Shu brought Lu Xiaoyu out for meal. Lu Xiaoyu looked up curiously, "Lu Shu, can I enter the remains? I am so much more capable than that Chen Xuan. In a few days' time, he probably can't even beat Xiao Xiongxiu." Upon hearing that, Xiao Xiongxiu instantly puffed out his chest and held his head high before Lu Xiaoyu. "Aren't you a little too disdainful towards those from the clans? You never know, he may have some special skills up his sleeves and even if he can't summon any powers, he may still be able to obtain some special instruments. However, it is indeed true that he is no match for you, neither is Gao Shinin. After all, considering your spirit, you are already possessing the capability of 2D grade experts." Lu Shu said thoughtfully. However, despite Lu Xiaoyu's impressive power and the fact that Lu Shu also wished to bring her around to play at the remains, the question was how could he do it? He may be able to use his ties with Jiang Shui to get her in, but it is utterly impossible to get her into the remains. Lu Shu certainly was not the overly protective kind. The basic consensus between the two as they grew up together was to share both happiness and pains together. Still, Lu Shu would bear the greater part of any burden, for he was the elder brother. However, it was not in her character for Lu Xiaoyu to live on her brother like a parasite. She could not stand the situation either and so was willing to help him set up a stall, wash his clothes and handle some simple housework, willing to help bear his burden, to fight alongside him. Lu Shu, on the other hand, knew that Lu Xiaoyu was willing to. Chapter 253. How Lu Xiaoyu entered the remains still required continued observation. At the same time, Lu Shu pondered another question: if Lu Xiaoyu entered the remains, she might be the only child left inside. Even if Lu Xiaoyu was wearing the celestial cloak, the features might be too obvious. There was a stark difference between the physique of a child and an adult. If the entire camp only comprised a child who was 1.5 meters tall, wouldn't it be deceiving for Lu Xiaoyu to put on the celestial cloak to hide her identity from everyone? Recently, Lu Xiaoyu's growth had been remarkable after keeping with her nutritional needs. Although Lu Xiaoyu had always been watching her diet, there was a stark contrast between having the monetary means and the lack of it. In the past, it meant having 1 to 2 eggs daily, with the addition of meat occasionally. What about now? Every lunch, Li Xianyi fed Lu Xiaoyu as though she was her granddaughter. The chairman of the foundation also doted on her as she was given any and every good food available. Lu Shu's $300 lunch allowance was definitely not enough. He initially wanted to fork out more money, but Li Xianyi rejected it. She did not want Lu Xi to fork out any money and even claimed that the lunch was prepared for Lu Xiaoyu and it was none of Lu Shu's business. At dinner, Lu Xiaoyu was guaranteed meat at every meal. After coming out from their tent, Lu Xiaoyu followed Lu Shu to collect their plates from the food truck. She honestly queued behind Lu Shu, and it finally came to her turn. The duty chef exclaimed in astonishment, "There's such a beautiful girl at the campsite? I will give you special welfare for whatever you want to eat." Lu Xiaoyu passed her plate forward. "Give me a plate of braised beef brisket." "Only beef brisket." Lu Shu was so glad at that moment. When he turned around, he saw Jiang Shuyi coming out after packing things up. Following behind her were Qin Zuan and Gao Shenin. At this point, the campsite remained empty. There were only that 1,000 few Daoyuan class students from Xijing town at the campsite. The rest of the students from Qingzhou province had yet to arrive. Lu Shu whispered to Jiang Shuyi, who was by his side, "Why do I feel that the campsite is so deep? Aren't we afraid that we may face the last situation? What if we get rolled in again?" "Rolled in, it's just rolling in." Jiang Shuyi looked at Lu Shu with a strange look. "They're all soldiers now, even if they're not rolled in, they still have to go in." Lu Shu had a sudden realization. Indeed, the Daoyuan class students' identities had changed. They were now soldiers who drew a salary and should be equipped with responsibility. They were no longer ordinary students, they were a part of the country's machinery. Unfortunately, the Heavenly Network was bent on training their soldier. These greenhouse flowers could never be weathered. It was an era of peace. Since Earth did not have opportunities for military training, they could only go to the remains. Lu Shu initially thought that the Heavenly Network was harsh, but on second thought, he found it logical. On the evening before, there was a disaster brought by some awakened people in mid-Africa. They have been paid by independent personnel with a hefty sum to participate in war. Ever since the early commercialization of the awakened people in Europe and America, someone finally lifted the awakened person and directed them like a knife to the commoners. Following that, some awakened people who were originally active in the commercial field began to fade out of the scene, leaving only a few people to continue shining in commerce. As for the whereabouts of those awakened people who gradually faded out of sight, no one knew. Lu Shu felt a sense of danger over these matters. Someone once said that war was to attain peace, but Lu Shu thought otherwise. If war were to attain peace, then what's a logical explanation for the original war, which happened due to an outbreak of peace? He felt that war was a continuity of politics. The main reason behind a war was the pursuit of interests. In this context, the use of a mesmerizing word to explain war could hardly hide its toxicity. War would involve the death of people. Back then, everyone simply squatted to consume their food. At present, there were beyond 10 foldable tables available for use. The rest of the students had already finished their meals, with only a few of them eating alone. Lu Shu initially thought that Lu Xiaoyu had a huge appetite, but he realized that Chen Zuan had already finished 3 meal portions when he had yet to finish one. Just then, Chen Zuan was about to stand up to get his 4th portion. Lu Shu, looking complicated, said, "Chen Zuan, do you know that students nowadays are always idling, thinking of getting into a relationship, or something?" Chen Zuan was momentarily stunned. How could getting into a relationship be associated with idleness? Without thinking meticulously, Lu Shu continued, "You're the outstanding one." "How am I outstanding?" Chen Zuan was stunned again as he did not understand Lu Shu's train of thoughts. While others are idling and wanting to get into a relationship, you can't even get full. From Chen Zuan's distress, plus 233. "It's not that I'm not full," Chen Zuan boringly explained, "you'll understand in the future." Chen Zuan went to get his food after finishing his statement. Lu Shu was now stunned. From Chen Zuan's meaning, was he acquiring supernatural prowess from eating? He then turned around to see Lu Xiaoyu and Xiao Xiongxiu looking at Chen Zuan with admiration. He really admired those that were not full with the amount of food they ate. Lu Xiaoyu felt that she could eat out the entire army's food reserves. Gao Shinin was also preparing to get more food initially since eating 1 to 2 meal portions was no big deal for people of his age. It was even less of a big deal for physique-focused Gao Shinin. Disciples of the Heavenly Network were only required to add 900 pounds of strength at Class F, but Gao Shinin and fellow students found out that with the addition of their training, this clearance level still had rooms for improvement. They were willing to train so long as there was an increment. It didn't matter if it was an increment of 10 or 20 pounds. Hearing the words from Lu Shu, Gao Shinin was stunned when he was about to get more food. He was hesitating whether to continue eating. Go ahead, make yourself comfortable," Lu Shu smiled at Gao Shinin. When Chen Zuan and Gao Shinin left, Jiang Shui took the opportunity and asked curiously, "You've been staring at both of their wrist and neck. Are you thinking of earning a sum in the remains just like the last occasion?" "That's of course, you people are not concerned with these matters since you do not lack money. However, it is different for me. I have to support my family." Lu Shi smiled as he was not embarrassed at all. Life was life, there would be no meaning to it for going beyond one's ability. How did you repay a favor when others treat you to a meal and alcohol which cost tens of thousands? Why trap yourself just because of a lack of pride? Those who are poor can only sit by the roadside when they are sad, eat a few barbecue meat sticks and drink some beer before crying softly. Lu Shi smiled. As for the rich, they can cry in springs, cry at Jiuzhai Valley, cry on the plane, cry on the yacht, they can cry however they want to. Chapter 254. Jiang Shui was speechless after hearing Lu Shu's words. He suddenly said, "I'm not too sure whether my words are too presumptuous, but there is no hidden meaning in them. I simply want to ask whether you're willing to work for the team. I'm not asking you to leave the Heavenly Network. That simply means a faction. In this case, you will face lesser work pressure." Frankly speaking, Jiang Shui was a relatively simple person. Therefore, she might occasionally bring up the word of faction when speaking, rather than subtly mentioning it as a concealed corporation and coercion. Lu Shu was astonished. He then smiled and said, "Do not worry that I will misunderstand you. We have been interacting for so long and it isn't in my interest to misunderstand you. Frankly speaking, perhaps at Luocheng International School, Chao Qingxi is more valuable than me. Or even, in the long run, Luli also has more value than I do. I'm thankful for your kind gestures. I understand that you're doing this out of kindness, but I do not like to be restricted." Lu Shu would be more willing to join Li Xian's side if it was mandatory to pick a side, even though ambition could be something dangerous. Moreover, even till now, Lu Shu had not understood the ambition of the people in the foundation. However, it would be better to be less complicated and more enriching when interacting with ambitious individuals. However, this was just an assumption. Lu Shu wouldn't join any force if conditions permitted. Jiang Shuyi was slightly quiet. I'm sorry. He clearly knew how Lu Shu was as a person. Therefore, he was more concerned that the other party would think that such a tactic was an insult. Lu Shu then smiled and patted his shoulders. Don't fret over it, I will not misunderstand your good intention as an ill intent. So has your clan started to reach out to the Heavenly Network? Did Nie Ting agree? Jiang Shuyi shook his head. We're doing it discreetly. It's not just us, but the majority of the clans has set their sight on the Heavenly Network. Initially, a lot of businessmen wanted to hire Daoyuan class students or the awakened people, but it was probably some small commotions. Business and clan were two types of concept. The clans had been discreetly probing the Heavenly Network's bottom line. Or to be more precise, the Heavenly King's bottom line. To everyone's disappointing realization, it was impossible to obtain the Heavenly Network as a personal weapon. Yet, therein also lay the reason to why a clan could be so long-standing. Then, the think tankers decided to shift their attention to the internal department of the Heavenly Network since exerting external strength was difficult to impact the Heavenly Network. Everyone should, therefore, start effecting change from within. Nie Ting, although the Heavenly Network you had been ruling was untouchable, it was because you were the first master of the Eastern mainland. Perhaps someone would go beyond that in the future? Even if no one managed to overtake you, there would be a day when you would be embroiled in an accident or the cycle of birth, aging, illness, and death. In the clan's opinion, human longevity was no longer a limiting factor to their vision. They wanted to pursue evergreen in everything. To be able to do it was one thing. However, one would not be able to do it without starting. This was the vision of the clans. In fact, they were not in pursuit of short-term interests. They were more interested in the fruits of their management. They were transforming their comparative advantage in the field of economics to a potential strength for the future. It did not mean that they ought to receive the largest share of the pie, but at the very least, they did not want to achieve lesser than their counterparts. This was probably the reason why when a disaster struck, those businessmen, of whom gained ascendancy in a short period of time, were facing turbulence as compared to clans which remained stable. When the businessmen were pursuing short-lived interests, the clans had already stood at the widest area of the mountaintop to plan their layout and take precautions. Moreover, this thing wasn't aimless. The 7 Heavenly Kings were currently housed around the entire town. It might be difficult to rope in the Heavenly Kings. However, it would be relatively easier to rope in a Class C top practitioner. The difficulty of roping in a Class D practitioner was further lowered by a level. There was no need to mention about Class E, and for Class F, it couldn't qualify for the clan's vision. In actuality, the majority of the trivial matters in the internal department of the Heavenly Network was handled by those Class C top practitioners. Apart from Nie Ting, other Heavenly Kings were rarely involved in handling affairs, as they were either avoiding suspicion or concentrating on their practice. Of course, the two reasons might be associated with other Heavenly Kings. But Li Xiaoyi was certainly lazy. Amongst all the Heavenly Kings, the clans had the hardest time dealing with Li Xiaoyi. This fellow was milking all the benefits, but after receiving all the benefits, he couldn't be bothered with anyone, just like a hob meat. Everyone initially thought that this fatty was a little silly. In the end, they realized that he wasn't silly at all. Lu Shu was curious all of a sudden. Conceptually speaking, the burden of acquiring a talent by your clan is already on you. Why are you still so cold? There is no need for me to do it. Someone else will naturally go ahead to negotiate. Jiang Shuyi shook his head. I'm very curious. Which clan recruited Chao Qingxi? Lu Shu was constantly curious and observing Luo Cheng's one and only class a highly able talent. If Chao Qingxi was initially afraid of death like other students in the remains, Lu Shu wouldn't ask this question. Yet, at the outset, the girl was able to make a killing in the remains even though she had never participated in any form of battle. She individually got rid of a small team of skeletons, a feat which was not easily achieved. Lu Shu was very clear. Chao Qingxi was actually an evildoer who practiced awakening on top of being a practitioner. There was a need to know that even before the Heavenly Network established the Dao Yuan class system, Lu Shu already felt a wave of energy in her. Jiang Shui gave a complex look after hearing the name Chao Qingxi. This girl isn't simple at all. She is rejecting every clan who wants to interact with her as she sets her mind only on practice, ignoring everything else. A lot of people have commented that perhaps in the future, her name may be on the list of contenders for Heavenly Kings. At this moment, Chen Zuan and Gao Shinin had returned. While walking, Chen Zuan unhappily muttered, "Gao Shinin, why can't you just consider from another perspective? I'm not afraid of danger and difficulty because I want to take part in the Battle of Remains. Do you think I'm like those spoilt scions?" Gao Shinin kept mum. To him, a reality which had yet to be experienced was nothingness. He could only acknowledge Chen Zuan as a new friend if he showcased his brevity and guts. Chen Zuan was unhappy with his attitude. He switched his attention towards Lu Shu. Upon hesitating, he moved his attention to Jiang Shui, who gave a cold expression. He looked away and he was glad to see the adorable Lu Xiaoyu. "Xiaoyu, do you think I'm like those spoilt scions?" He didn't have the courage to post this question to both Lu Shu and Jiang Shui as he was afraid that he would suffer. Lu Xiaoyu was different as she looked very obedient and adorable. "You're different. You can eat much more than them," Lu Xiaoyu commented as she looked at the fully filled plate held by Chen Zuan. Chen Zuan. From Chen Zuan's Distress, +99. Chapter 255. As they were eating, loud rattling roars of the engines, coupled with sounds generated by the friction between the huge tires and road surface, were transmitted in the direction of the campsite's entrance late at night. The initial tranquility of the campsite was instantaneously disturbed. Many students who were practicing came out of their tents. In just a few minutes, the campsite was so crowded and vivid as though it had transformed into a school which just released its students. There were more than 10 troop lift trucks coming from afar. Lu Shu suddenly realized that these Dao Yuan class students from other provinces had finally arrived. There was no clue whether Wang Haoli and the rest had reached Xijing City. It was fairly interesting to recall this friend befriended during a brief journey. Then, at this moment, Lu Shu suddenly received a text message. "Wang Haoli, I've reached the hotel. The tour group will be heading to the next destination tomorrow. Wishing you the best." Lu Shu took a glance at the message but did not reply as he put the domestically produced divine-like phone back to his pocket. He meticulously observed the Dao Yuan class students who had just alighted, and they still looked the same. Yuzhou was still leading the nation for making out of the remains. Qingzhou and most other provinces held similar standards. Speaking of which, Lu Shu suddenly thought of the words Jiang Shui used to describe Chao Qingxi. If Yuzhou had a mightier overall strength than other provinces, that would mean that Chao Qingxi belonged to the strongest batch amongst the talents. It was unsure when she could break through Class C. Once Class C was attained, perhaps entering the inner chamber was certain. At this point, there was an oncoming boy who looked stern. There were a lot of schoolmates involuntarily sticking around his side. Lu Shu gave him a glance. The waves of magical energy from his body has attained Class D. He was no doubt a highly able talent, assuming that he had not attained honors. In truth, Class A highly able students were often revolved by others no matter where they were except for Chao Qingxi, an uninfluenced contender. There was another girl who had similar features as this student. Both talents looked incomparably outstanding. Chen Zuan beamed by the side as he looked at the two of them. "The two of you perhaps have attained Class A aptitude for abilities?" Gao Shinin laughed coldly. "It's better to not be terrified and piss your pants upon entering the remains. Aptitude for abilities does not represent anything." Sour, Chen Zuan fanned the air that was in front of his nose. "So sour." Just as Gao Shinin was about to break out, Chen Zuan suddenly changed the conversational topic. "Teacher, have you heard of the talent from Yuzhou? Her name is Chao Qingxi." Upon hearing this name, Gao Shinin appeared dignified. I've heard that she made a killing in the remains. Do you know what I'm most worried of? Chen Zuan baffled a sentence. What? I'm most afraid that other clans may have a similar talent. By then, our parents will just compare us with the kids from other clans and start to nag, Chen Zuan commented as he looked profoundly melancholy. Good for nothing, Gao Shinin said coldly. If one is really afraid that the pace of practice is slow, just go to the black market and collect some magical stones. It's easy to say. I'm not the only practitioner in my clan. I can't have all the resources used for practice. I'm sorry, Gao Shinin gave a gleaming white smile with his mouth wide opened. I'm the only sole practitioner in my clan. Chen Zuan settled down for a while before getting angry. Come on, let's degrade each other. Lu Shu felt a tinge of regret at the side. If only he had interfered, there would be no distress tonight. It was a pity. He seemed regretful as he looked at the Dao Yuan class students who were alighting from the trucks. Why do I feel that they don't seem wealthy at all? Not many of them wear a watch. Chen Zuan heard Lu Shi's words and felt curious. Brother Lu Shu, what does this statement mean? Well, Lu Shu pondered for a while. Perhaps you will understand once you enter the remains. Jiang Shuyi appeared oddly. Unsure of why, upon hearing Lu Shu's words, Jiang Shuyi's conscience was hoping that Lu Shu would not make his business too widely known without thinking whether Lu Shu has the capability of running this business. To be frank, Lu Shu felt that Chen Zuan was relatively interesting. Although this fellow seemed scheming, his personality wasn't very complicated. Additionally, an odd ambience was surfacing as the few of them gradually desired to form a small team, of which Chen Zuan's shameless interaction significantly contributed to it. Lu Shu wouldn't agree if it was said that Chen Zuan did not have an intention. It was still rather conspicuous when the few of them sat at the side of the dining table. The rest of the students would uncontrollably glance towards their direction. The ones who attracted the most attention within the group of them were Jiang Shuyi and Lu Xiaoyu. Lu Shu glanced at the group of boisterous students as they were being allocated to their individual tents by their respective class form teachers. He felt a good sense of freedom as there wasn't any class form teacher to supervise him while he was here. As compared to the relaxing environment Lu Shu and the rest were in, the majority of the Dao Yuan class students appeared dignified. This was because what was considered an opportunity for Lu Shu was a danger to the students. Lu Shu instantaneously felt a huge sense of astonishment. At this moment, Chen Zuan's phone rang. He composedly lowered his head to take a glance. The first message pertained to information provided by the clans. As the clans were previously collecting information on Class A highly able evildoers, they ended up in a situation where they were clueless about Jiang Shui, Gao Shinin, and Lu Shu. Chen Zuan was shocked as he continued reading. Gao Shinin's opportunities to acquire honors were not intentional. Residing at the borders, he would occasionally come across drug dealers from other territories. Once, the drug dealers held up a gun. Gao Shinin managed to kill 4 of them. He even arrested one of the awakened people alive. No wonder there was an air of arrogance as he was a disciple who had killed someone. The source had stated that Jiang Shui wasn't weak either. She had killed more than 6 skeleton cavalries in the remains. Chen Zuan initially thought that the 2 of them were the most outstanding students this time around. He gasped when he saw Lu Shu's particulars. He was mired in disbelief by the details before raising his head to glance at Lu Shu once again. Formulated the long-range awakened person strength-related attacking mode, one which was currently being promoted experimentally by the internal department of the Heavenly Network. Individually destroyed a whole team of skeleton cavalries. The number of skeleton cavalries being killed was approximately 17. Resale of magical weapons in the remains to grant several people the opportunity to exchange military honors. Lastly, the text message had an attachment, a photo which had been taken when Lu Shu was coming out of the remains. He had big gold chains and small watches all over, with a bundle of spears on his shoulders as he displayed an awe-inspiring body of gumption and frivolousness. Chen Xuan only understood now that Lu Shu was truly the real big shot. Ignoring both his aptitude for abilities and outlook, he was currently the big shot. He recalled the words Lu Shu said to him. Why do I feel that they don't seem wealthy at all? Not many of them wear a watch. Brother Lu Shu, what does this statement mean? Perhaps you will understand once you enter the remains. Chen Xuan suddenly raised his wrist and smiled at Lu Shu. Brother Lu Shu, this Bulgari of mine costs 80 grand. This piece was brought out for fun. I don't usually bring those watches which are too luxurious out. I've better ones at home. Gao Shinin appeared appalled by Chen Xuan's sudden act in flaunting his wealth. Idiot. What's there to flaunt with an 80 grand watch? You know nothing. Chen Xuan currently felt a sense of accomplishment as though he was the only sober one amongst a world of drunkards.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty, then we just put 'em on the shelf. Try to look to the heavens.